Hello everyone, my name is Stijn Orlans and today we're doing a tutorial on Fusion360. In this tutorial, I'm gonna explain what Fusion360 is, why we're using it, I'm gonna talk about the interface, the tools, and I'm gonna give some examples of stuff I've made so you get an idea of what you'll be able to make after watching this video. So I hope you enjoy it, let's get right into it. Alright, so what exactly is Fusion360? Fusion360 is a program by Autodesk. They've made 3ds Max, Maya, AutoCAD, you probably know some of them. But Fusion360 is mainly made for engineers and product designers. As you can see, they focus on three main steps here: the design, the engineering and simulation, and the computer-aided manufacturing. We're only gonna focus on the design because after all we just want to make a cool model, export it to our preferred rendering software and make some cool renders with it afterwards. So we're not really gonna dive into the simulation and stuff. You can also do 3D printing with it. I've done it at school before. It's pretty interesting and pretty straightforward as well. Fusion360 has a free trial. It's also free for students for 3 years if I'm not mistaken. So I'll leave a link in the description. There's no reason not to check it out. It's really great software for modeling. So next up we're gonna check out why I'm using Fusion360 and not any other software. So why do I use Fusion and not any other software like Cinema 4D? Well, I started off in Cinema 4D modeling all my models, and I quickly realized that if you want to make complex hard surface models, Cinema 4D is just not gonna cut it. And why is that? Because if we make all these little details and cuts in the model, Cinema 4D is just gonna have a bad geometry. Everything is gonna be intersecting with each other. You're gonna have way too many polygons on your model just to keep it clean, and it's just very slow after all. So I looked for a solution and I found Fusion360. And in this software you can just make a solid body, make as many cuts as you want, and you don't really have a problem with polygons because you're just working on a solid body. So afterwards we can export this and convert it to polygons, and then we can just select the density of our polygons and you have as many polygons as you want. I do almost all my models in Fusion360, so I really advise checking it out because I just use it for the simplest things now, and it's just so fast and easy to use. Now let's talk a little bit about the interface. First of all, if we look at the top left, click this button, we see a list with all the models we've made before. Your list is probably gonna be empty if you've never used it, but you can store everything in folders. It's all on a cloud, so if you save it right here, it's just all gonna go there. If the program crashes, it's gonna do a recovery and everything is gonna be in there. I've never really lost any project, so it's really handy to just have it right here. If you want to make a new file, you just start a new design right here. And next up I'm gonna tell you how to move around in the program. So if you want to move around, just click down the scroll button to move around, scroll up and down to zoom, and if you hit shift and click the scroll button you can rotate. Down below you see the same navigations. If you just click one you can rotate around, press escape to exit the orbit tool, go into the pan, same thing, zoom, same thing, press escape to leave, and right here you can adjust some settings. I just leave those on default. Right here you can turn on the grid, turn it off, and right here you can select multiple views. In the top right we also have this box to rotate. I use it very often to just snap to certain angles. Right here, if you select a surface on your model, it's also gonna snap to that surface. So next up we have our tools right here. If we check out this, you see we're in a model space. We also have a sculpting space, and you can activate that by creating a form. But then we're working with the same techniques as we use in Cinema 4D with just subdivision surface modeling, and I don't really use these too often. If I need to make organic shapes or more special shapes, I just go inside Cinema 4D and I do it the good old way. But I don't really need these shapes too often, so we're gonna use the modeling space today. We also have a patch space. You can use it to make also really weird shapes, but they are completely hollow inside. We also have a sheet metal workspace. We don't really need that right now. A rendering workspace. I assume we're gonna use a render in another program. Fusion's render is not too great. You can add some basic materials, but that's about it. Also an animation workspace. Simulation is used by engineers. You can do stress tests, thermal, add forces, and everything you can name. I don't really know too much about that. We also have computer-aided manufacturing, where you can program paths where your machine is gonna go to drill out certain holes and stuff. And we also have a drawing space where you can print out everything on paper, make plans, but we're not really too interested in that, so we are only gonna use the model space. That's also about 99% of the stuff I use inside Fusion. We're gonna check out these tools later in the video. The last thing I want to tell you about is this and the timeline. So first of all, here we have all the stuff that's going on in our workspace. We have our origin with the X, Y and Z axis and the different planes. We have our bodies, that's just our model. You can just see that I've used different bodies in this model just to make it easier to texture later. You can also see I've used a reference image to make this, and those are right here. And most of the stuff you do is from a sketch. So I'm gonna teach you how to make sketches because that's the most important part. And we also have some construction lines, some extra axes to rotate around or mirror or whatever command you're doing. I will tell you more about that in the end of the video. And down here we have a timeline where we can go back to the beginning. If I turn all of these back on and we go to the start, you can see our model is gonna disappear. It might take a while because this is already pretty heavy model, but you can hit play right here and it's gonna go over the whole timeline and play a video, sort of a time lapse of how you made your model. And you can go to certain things you did, double click them and edit them and stuff. So this is a really cool feature. Of course, if you hit move to the end, it's just gonna go back to the end and bring back your full model. So that's about everything I want to tell about the workspace. So let's check out these tools right now and start making something. Let's take a look at these tools now. So the first thing we're gonna do is make a new design, so we can start an empty workspace. We're gonna check out all of these. So I'm not gonna explain a few of them because I've never used them, or I don't use them that often, or they are not that useful. So don't be afraid to check them out yourself. If you go stand on it, it's gonna open up a text box and explain what the thing does. So the first thing we're gonna do is create a sketch, because that's the thing we're gonna be extruding from. So yeah, Fusion is gonna ask you to select a plane. Let's just select this one. And here we have all our sketch options. Let's go through these quickly. We have a line. Remember these shortcuts because they are really handy to use. So for our line, we press L. We select the starting point and we select the end point, or we just type in a measurement like 50 millimeters. The next thing we have is a rectangle. You just click for the starting point and you go around like this. You can type in, let's say, 80, and if you want to lock that dimension, you just hit the tab button and you see a little lock right here. So it locks that measurement, so you can only adjust this one. I use it really often because sometimes things get in the way and it's way easier to do it that way. The next thing is a circle. Press C for circle. You have a center point circle. You have a 2-point circle where you select the top point and the bottom. It's handy sometimes if you don't have a center point. Same thing for this rectangle. Next up we have the arc. You press the beginning point, the end point, and then you can play around with the arc. Next up we have a polygon. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can also change the amount of corners. You can pick 80, you can't even see that, but let's say 8 for example. We have an ellipse. Just select the middle point, top point, and then this dimension. Then we have a slot. You just start a beginning point, an end point, and you can make this. It's a very handy tool to cut out some nice little details. Just discovered it recently, so like I said, don't be afraid to click on any of these because you really be surprised of the things you haven't used and are pretty handy. Next up we have a spline. It's gonna draw a smooth line through the points you select. If you hit this green button and escape the tool, you can play around with these. Then we have a conic curve. It's the same as the arc. The only difference is that if you put your third point down, you can still play with these. Then we have a point, not really too useful. Text, it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not gonna dive into that. To check out these, I'm gonna draw a little profile first. If you select these, it's gonna create a line that you can just draw from the end. So we have this we have this random shape right now, and if we check out fillet and select a corner or just 2 lines, you can add a fillet to these. If you go too far, it's gonna mess up your sketch, so stay inside these bounds. Then we have a trim function. If you click on a line, you delete it, or if you click outside and just swipe, if you press T for the trim tool, if you click down, you see this little square pop up. If you go through a line, it's also gonna erase it. The next thing we have is extend. Let's say we create a line right here, and it's a little bit short, and we want to connect these two, and in this case you can just draw a line, but in some cases it's handy to use the extend tool. If you click this, it's gonna extend the line itself. Same thing for breaking. If you have 2 lines intersecting, you can break this line at an intersecting point. Next up we have the sketch scale. If you just select it and select the reference point, you can scale this part up. Don't really use it that much. Then we have offset, type O for the shortcut. If you select a line, you can offset from that line, but be aware, if you offset again from an already offset line, you can't do that. You always have to start from the original line. Then we have the mirror function. When you want to mirror something, you just select the lines you want to mirror and you select the mirror line. It's actually really easy in Fusion. It's just asking you everything it needs, and just check out what it says here. It's pretty self-explanatory, almost every tool is. And click a mirror line, click OK, and it creates a mirrored sketch. Then we have a circular pattern. Let's delete all of these for a second. let's say we draw a circle right here, and we want to clone it in a circular pattern. Just click circular pattern, select your object, select the center point, and you select the you type in the amount you want, let's say 5, and you can also do it over a certain angle, but you don't really need that too much. I do it over the full thing most of the time. Press OK, and there you have it. Then the rectangular pattern is kind of the same thing. You select your object and you can go into different directions. Just check out these, it's pretty easy. The settings are also self-explanatory. The last thing we have is this one. I don't really use these too much. You can add dimensions, but it's more for your your drawing mode. And right here you can stop the sketch, or right here. So let's go back to a little random shape for now. Alright, so let's finish our sketch, and now we have this. All our sketches are gonna be here. The following thing is the create category. We have a few different ones here, so the most important one is extrude. You probably know it already from other programs. If you press E for extrude, click on your sketch, you can extrude from the sketch. You can do it on one side, two separate sides, or symmetric. You can type in the distance, and yeah, that's about it. Right here, the operations, I'm gonna show you what these mean. So let's just do new body for now. Click OK. Now if you make a sketch on this plane, let's say a circle, stop the sketch, use E for extrude again, and extrude this one out. We're gonna be able to use these different operations. So the first one is join. It's gonna connect these two touching models together in one body right here. If we press OK, you can see they're just one object. If we do cut, we go into this side, you're gonna appear in a red color. You're gonna cut out a cylinder out of the model. If you press OK, it's also gonna be one body. The last one is intersect. It's gonna leave out the parts that are intersecting, and then we have just a new body if you want to create a separate body right here. So let's just join these together for now. The next thing we have is revolve. That's also a really important one. Let's use the sketch we started with. Revolve, you can select a profile and rotate it around an axis. Let's say this one, and it's gonna rotate around. It's really useful in some cases. The next thing we have is a sweep. If you have a certain profile and you also made a spline in a second sketch, you can create a profile that's gonna sweep over the entire sketch. I'm not gonna show that here, but as you can see in the picture, it's pretty handy to use as well. You can use it for pipes and cables and stuff, but I prefer to use the pipe tool. A loft is also really handy to create some complex shapes. I've not used it too often, but sometimes you get those cases where you need to go from a square to a cylinder to a circle, like displayed here. It's really handy to do because you can't really do it any other way. You can do it as complex as you want. You can do multiple profiles behind each other, but not that important. Rip, never used it. Web, don't use it as well. A hole is actually the same thing as just extruding a circle. It's more used by engineers because you can go back afterwards and change the diameter of the holes and It's pretty easy to adjust, but I prefer to just make a circle in my sketch and extrude them afterwards. A thread, you don't really need it except for making realistic models, but we're not really doing that right now. You create a box as well, a cylinder, sphere, torus, all these primitive shapes. You select a plane, you draw a rectangle and go up, and that's our cube. Same thing for these, they are pretty easy to use as well. Coil, a pipe, you just make a spline or path. Let's take this one for example. It's not gonna look pretty, but you can make these square, triangle, hollow, kind of the same thing as the sweep tool. Then we have the pattern tool. It works the same with bodies as I explained with the sketches, but you have to select bodies right here. It's gonna be on faces by default, so make sure to change it to bodies. And then we have the mirror feature, same thing. You need a plane to mirror from, so you can use the origin if you want to use this plane, but you can also offset planes and create different planes right here, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Then we have thicken. It's used for these revolve objects to thicken the body. And then we have these. I don't really use these that often, as I already told you. Then we come to the modifying palette. Here we can modify our bodies that we've just made, so let's hide our sketch origin and use this body we made the first time. So modify, we have present pool. It doesn't work on much, I must say, but sometimes it can be really handy to just click on these and it's gonna extend it for you. As I said, it's not working all the time, so don't rely on that too much. Just change the sketch if you need a different shape. Then we have a fillet, the same thing as in our sketch. I don't really like to use them as much in my sketch because you have way more control over it if you see it on the body directly. So just select an edge, play with the arrow, don't go too far as I said, because it's gonna do weird things sometimes. You have a constant radius, you can use this length between these 2 points. You can have variable radius. Just play around with these settings, you can do some cool stuff for that. Then we have a rule fillet. It's used to fillet everything on a certain face. Then we have a chamfer. It's actually just the same thing as a fillet, but with a clean straight cut. You can do different distances as well. Then we have a shell. Don't use that too often. I think it worked like this. Yes. Yeah, it can be handy, but I've not used it too many times. Then we have a draft. Don't use that often as well. A scale tool. Select your body. Select the point you want to scale to. Let's say the origin point. You can do uniform scaling and non-uniform scaling. Let's do a uniform one for now. Let's scale it 2 times. The next one is combine. If you made 2 separate objects, you can still do these operations I told about in the extrude tab. If you say you made 2 different bodies and you still want to connect them, or you want to cut out certain bodies, you can still do it here. I use it a lot because sometimes if I work with a symmetric model, I just cut it in 2 and I work on one side, then I mirror it on the other side and I connect them together with the combine and join tool. Next up we can split faces. I don't use that. We can split a body. Let's say we want these 2 objects separately. You select your body to split, you select a plane to split on, you press OK, and we have 2 different bodies right here. With combine we can just select these 2 bodies, press join and connect them together again. The other ones I don't really use too often. We can move around our model obviously by selecting our body, clicking right and move/copy. You can move it around here. You can also set a pivot point. You can create a copy as well. This is the only way of doing it, but you can also do Ctrl+C+V and it's gonna be on the same position, but I like to use the move/copy tool where you can just select create a copy and drag it into a position. So if you want to delete a body, you just press your body, click right, and don't press delete, because sometimes if you merge different bodies together, it's gonna go back on the timeline and delete only the parts where they are together. So just press remove, and that's the cleanest way to just get rid of the whole body in one go. And yeah, that's about it about the modify tool. Then we have assemble. It's used by product designers to combine different bodies together and let them move and maybe animate them in the animation space. Not really too familiar with this. I don't think you need it. I just combine them together afterwards in another software. Then we have the construct palette. You can offset planes, make axes through, let's say we want an axis on this one to revolve around. You can do it right here. You can offset planes like this one. Let's say I want a plane here about 100 millimeters from this one. And yeah, I use these very often because sometimes your model isn't really symmetric around the origin, so you need some extra helping tools. Next up, with the expect menu, we can measure certain distances if you aren't sure about a distance. For the rest, I don't use these other ones too often. Right here you can insert an image to use as reference. Use attached canvas. If we hide this body for a second, you can select a face, select an image in your folder. Then I change the opacity to about 50, because if your body is behind the image, you can still see it through the image. Then for scale, you want to use bigger images than it's gonna be when you import it. Most of the time I just use 333 and it's gonna create a pretty big image to work on. You don't want it to be too small. You can find your images right here with the canvases. Then right here you can do 3D printing. Just click it and it's gonna explain everything. I've done it once and it's pretty easy to do. And for the rest of it, you don't really need these. So yeah, that's about it, about all the tools. If you understand everything I've told you right now and you can use these tools easily, you should be able to create almost everything I've created with Fusion. So now I'm gonna show you a few examples of things I've made and explain what tools I used where. So yeah, let's check it out. Alright, so now I'm gonna show you a few of the projects I did in Fusion. These aren't my biggest ones, but just a few I want to showcase that you should definitely be able to do. I made a sled, some pretty basic shapes with the wood, just some chamfers right here, and I just made these straight and just put them on a little angle. Then I mirrored everything. I made the engine itself with a revolve, so I draw this line and I revolve it, and then I add some screws with circular patterns, all different kinds of patterns right here in the rotor. Then I added some straps, just drew out these lines, and then used an offset in my sketch. I also added some things in the middle, and that's about it. these little screws as well. I use a pattern feature too. Then for the handgun, I used a reference, but not a picture. I just used a reference from Call of Duty actually, and I just try to make it as exact as possible. Turn out pretty good. These are really basic techniques, just some problem solving and thinking about how to do things the fast way. And then I have these futuristic glasses. This is my most recent project. I was really surprised they weren't easy to make. I used 3 photos, and I used a DAS model to get ahead, and just took a snapshot of the 3 views in the viewport in Cinema 4D, so I could make the glasses the same size. So I made a sketch from this side, from the right side, and from the top, and I just cut these out into one shape that will fit. This is really all about just problem solving and trying to find a way to do things the good way. Then I add some little details on the side, not too hard to do, but the shape of the glasses weren't too easy. And the last thing I want to show you in Fusion is how to add these textures. You just go to your body, click on the right mouse button, click on physical material, and on the side you're gonna see this box opening. Click on these arrows, and here you can select materials and just drag them on the part you want. I don't use these textures that often. I just use them when I have glass material, so it's clear to see where glass has to be and I can still see through it, just to see how the model looks. Then the last thing I'm gonna show you is how to export a model from Fusion360 into an OBJ that you can later export in Cinema 4D. So you're gonna take your file, click export, export as an IGS, save it somewhere. Then you're gonna open Moment of Inspiration right here, and you click File, Open. You open the file. Let me find it real quick. Alright, then you change this to IGS because we exported as an IGS. We open it. Then we're gonna see our model appear in the program. Then you click Save, save as an OBJ, give it a name, press Save, and then you're gonna see this window pop up. The more polygons you want, the more you have to do. Slide to the right. If the model isn't too complex, you can just pick the biggest one to make these curves really smooth. You can always add a subdivision surface level to your model in another software. And yeah, just leave it on n-gons if you want triangles and stuff, but I prefer just n-gons because that's easier to texture. Press OK and your model is exported as an OBJ. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm gonna try and make one more with Fusion where I just make a full model together with you guys, then export it, and then make a part 2 tutorial where I texture it, render it in Cinema 4D with Octane Render. And yeah, this was my first tutorial, so I hope it wasn't too boring. I'm gonna try to practice and get these a little smoother. But yeah, leave me some comments for ideas. Check out my work on Instagram, Stijn Orlans. And yeah, hope you enjoyed. See you later. Bye.